Chapter 2. Half-Shaman. Evening descended upon the inn almost imperceptibly. Shadows merged soundlessly with the furniture, and the lamps flared to life on their own. Inside, it became clear, here, evening never truly ends. It simply wanders the corridors, sleepless and calm. The table was set in haste, yet it looked as though it had stepped out of an old postcard. Wooden bowls, the dim light of a lamp, a plump bottle of wine, and a steaming dish of roasted meat sending up vapor like incense. The guests had already taken their seats, some awkwardly, some with familiar, unhurried ease. In the background flickered Michael's wife, bustling about with preparations, silent, emotionless, as if she were just part of the decor. Before dinner began, the host leaned forward, slowly drew his hand behind his head and tightened the band around it, as though he were fastening it not on his head but around his own doubts to keep them quiet. He then solemnly poured a handful of small, time-blackened bones onto a wooden board in the center of the table. Spoons clinked softly against bowls, someone cleared their throat, and then suddenly others began to tap their wooden spoons in rhythm, consciously, evenly, almost ritually. A strange hum rose over the table. Someone began to moan, low and drawn out. Gradually others joined in. The hostess, Michael's wife, even Aunt Zolia. The host swayed back and forth as if entering a trance. Henry frowned, leaned toward Lucas. What are they doing? Praying, maybe? Lucas muttered uncertainly. Henry raised his brows and asked aloud, directly to the host, "Is this a prayer?" Michael's son lifted his head from his drawing. "No, sir," he said clearly. "It's a memorial." "Wonderful," Henry muttered through his teeth. "Just what we needed. Meat, potatoes, and the looming threat of sudden necromancy." The boy looked at him seriously, almost serenely. "Sir, what do you think?" The host kept moaning, swaying harder now. Michael's wife picked up the rhythm with her spoons, tapping it out with childlike precision. The boy bent again over his drawing. On the corner of the page were shapes, shadows, stretched arms, and a man in a mask. Henry just stared, frozen, as if he'd fallen into a dream someone else had written for him. And then, in a single instant, it all stopped, as if nothing had happened. No bones, no moaning, no strange rhythm of spoons. Familiar voices filled the table once again. Zolia, meanwhile, was dishing out stewed meat and potatoes, pouring wine. "Help yourselves," she said brightly. "The meat's fresh, the potatoes are from our cellar, the wine's aromatic, homemade." She paused, glanced at the guests, and added with her trademark half-smile, "Until proven otherwise." Michael's mother raised her eyebrows. "Remember his first fiancée? The Wobbler. That's what everyone called her. Round but cheeky. I never understood what he saw in her, though compared to Lily, like a stump beside an armchair." "Mom, don't start," Michael murmured, lowering his gaze. "Don't mom me," she snorted. "You let a girl like Lily slip away. Married your brother. What a waste. Though, your brother," she muttered almost to herself, then changed the subject. "Always meddling in something. An adventurer like you. Useless, both of you. You should have finished your chemistry degree. Would have been more use. Instead, quit school, quit everything. Should have gone to work with your father at Callach." Henry lifted a brow. "Callach? Well, yes," waved the mother. "It translates somehow, I forget. Not the point. It's our local chemical plant. Good pay there." "And you, dear Lily," said Aunt Zolia softly, unexpectedly tender, "were my favorite bride. Remember when you and Michael played wedding as kids? He made a ring from foil, you painted your lips with your mom's lipstick, and the curtains as your veil. I still laugh remembering it. Love, you see, isn't in words," she added quietly. "It's in what remains when the words fall silent." "Yes, I remember," Lily said softly. "It was fun." "Weddings aren't toys, happiness is fragile, life, a trap," muttered Maria. "Oh, stop your lamenting, Maria," waved Zolia. "Always with your riddles and witchy tales." Michael twirled an old paperclip in his fingers, the same gesture he always made when he was about to speak seriously. He silently downed a glass of wine, then another, narrowed his eyes. "And yet we've never heard the story," he said quietly, almost evenly. "What did really happen to my brother?" A thick, sticky silence settled over the table. Someone pushed away a bowl. Someone coughed into their hand, awkwardly as if trying to break the pause but only deepening it. Lily calmly raised her glass. "Well then, let me try to tell it." At that very moment, spoons clattered again, plates rustled, wine splashed into glasses, as if no one wanted to hear what she'd said. "So, where to begin?" "Okay," said Lily in her firm, trademark tone. "I'll try to piece together what I remember and what I've understood. My husband, James, he and Michael were treasure hunters. You all know that. No need to repeat it. One day James found an artifact. He said it brought luck. At least it seemed that way at first. Later, everything, well, spiraled out of control, but that's not the point." "Luck?" snorted Michael's mother. "I've seen the kind. One glance from him, and you'd better start digging your own grave." Lily listened to Zolia, nodded slightly, and went on. "As you all know, our town once saw real battles, not the playful kind, for land. First, between ours and the Scots. Then we started fighting among ourselves. And on those old battlefields," Lily continued, "years later many dug again. I'm saying this for the guests. They searched for all sorts of things, gear, weapons, artifacts." She shrugged. "Though really everyone was looking for the same thing, a trace of power." "Pardon the interruption," said Lucas, pointing to the bottle. "What's that drink? No one's touched it." Zolia smiled politely. "That's Michael and his wife's creation. Cider." "Oh, not cider," snapped Michael. "It's ale." "Oh, what's the difference? Why isn't anyone drinking it then?" Silence. "Would you like some, Professor?" Zolia asked with mock ceremony. "From the maker himself." "Why not?" Lucas brightened. "I'll never turn down such an honor." Someone snickered. Whispers went around the table. Lucas ignored them. The cork popped, a light apple aroma drifted up, and the glass was handed to him. Michael's wife poured silently. Lucas nodded politely. "Much obliged." He sipped, savored for a second, then decisively finished the glass. Unexpectedly pleasant. Tart, like an argument. "Still, what's it made of?" "Apples," the host replied calmly without looking up. "From our orchard, on the Cape." "Of the damned," Lucas clarified. The glass trembled slightly in his hand. He carefully wiped his lips with a napkin and muttered as if calming himself. "Well, once won't kill me. Please continue. Sorry for interrupting." Lily looked at Michael. "And then, as you recall, almost all the digs began to be financed by that lawyer, with his gang." "Yeah, I know," admitted Michael reluctantly, glancing aside. "He found that weird artifact. I told him, give it to them and forget it, but you know how he was." "Only I never understood," Lily said softly. "Did you already know where he got it from, and what he planned to do?" She held his gaze, then asked directly, "Did you see it yourself?" Michael shook his head. "No, he only spoke about it, but when he did, his eyes went glassy. It was terrifying." "No, of course not," Michael shrugged. "He said he'd think about it." "Yeah, think. Said he found a buyer, though I doubt it. No one else was in that head but him and the idea." Lily nodded, unblinking. "I think so too. One night he just walked in, like from nowhere, and said, 'We're leaving. We'll be rich. Pack your things.'" She smiled faintly, as if recalling a life that wasn't hers. "We packed in haste, like the apocalypse was knocking. Everything, a blur. The next thing I remember, we were speeding somewhere. He borrowed money, then more. Casinos." A pause. "At first he won. A lot. He was in some strange ecstasy, happy like a child, said he knew how to find the clean demon. That everything would change, Lily went on. He was in a trance. I'd never seen him like that. Then the lamp above the table flickered. Once, twice, nervously. The air suddenly grew dense, the room smaller, as if the walls were breathing in. At that moment, Michael's paperclip snapped in his hand. The host struck his mug on the table and froze as if struck by revelation, and Brurick, the kettle on his chest, hissed and whistled like an air raid alarm. Everything went silent. Even the boy stopped drawing, pencil suspended midair. Lily looked around, confused. What? I don't understand. What did I say? Zolia exhaled loudly, deflating the tension. Classic. Artifact, casino, money, demons, and a hospital at the end. At least he's alive. How else could that story end? She muttered, leaning back. Like a film script. She snapped her fingers as if trying to melt the frozen air. Well, what happened next? Now I'm curious myself. Michael coughed, set down his glass, and asked quietly, And the artifact? He said it was stolen, or lost it drunk, I don't even know. He paused, gave an uneasy half-smile. He never really showed it to anyone, not even me. By that time, the professor had downed his third glass of ale cider and suddenly yelped. Everyone turned. He looked as if he'd spotted a cockroach in his plate. For a few seconds, Lucas sat motionless, staring at his food, as if waiting for it to explain itself. Then he suddenly said, Hello. Henry squinted, half smiling. Who are you talking to? The potato, Lucas replied calmly. It said hello. What? Am I impolite? Good Lord, muttered Maria. He's serious? Must be side effects from his allergy meds, snorted Henry. All right, let's see what happens next. Professor Lucas raised his fork as if offering a toast. Just look at her. She's smiling and saying something with a secret intent, if I'm not mistaken. He poked the potato with the fork. See, she's got a temper too, biting the fork. A short pause hung in the air. Someone sniffed, trying not to laugh. Another one snorted, and then the wave rolled across the table. First quiet giggles, then coughing, and finally everyone burst out laughing. Someone hid their face in their hands, someone else shook silently, and Zolia even set her glass down so as not to spill the wine. Lucas blinked, came to. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I was just talking to a potato, he mumbled, almost whispering. His glasses slid slowly to the tip of his nose. He froze with the fork in midair, afraid to jab it, as if what lay on the plate wasn't garnish but a freshly caught fish, and he couldn't decide whether to dissect it or let it swim back into the lake with apologies. Oh, come on, Professor, said Zolia with a smile. You just lifted everyone's spirits with that potato of yours. Not every day the side dish starts a conversation. Yeah, Henry nodded, still wiping away tears. Must be the side effects. The meds expired and now the side effects went crazy. It'll pass. He reached out and patted Lucas amicably on the shoulder. Lucas set the fork down and shook his head. I'm serious. She really was looking at me. Michael cleared his throat and said quietly, Lucas, sorry if that's from my brew, though I'm pretty sure I didn't add anything extra. He paused, glancing away as if not entirely sure of his own words. Lucas adjusted his glasses, looking aside, deep in thought. Then what caused it? Time will tell, said Zolia as though drawing a final line. Indeed, murmured Maria. Everything alive listens, especially food. I've got a question, actually, said Lucas, pushing the plate away. He adjusted his glasses and blushed slightly at the sound of his own voice. Sorry, but I'd like to know, for science. He hesitated, inhaled, and finally exhaled. Why is the hotel called the 29.5 Shamans? Again, it was as if someone had pressed pause. Even the spoons froze mid-air. For several seconds, no one uttered a word. Then the host slowly rose, He looked from Lucas to the other guests, as if weighing who already understood and who still didn't. "Dinner is over," he said deliberately. A pause. "And whoever's curious about where the name came from," he let the silence stretch, "may visit me this evening for a cup of tea." Henry couldn't resist. I'd like to know," burst out of him before he could think. The host tilted his head slightly. The bandage still hid his eyes, but it felt as if he were staring straight into Henry's soul. "Well then, if you're not afraid to learn all the secrets," he said softly, almost whispering, "come." At that moment, Brurick, the kettle on his chest, hissed proudly, as if confirming the invitation. A thin stream of steam escaped, winding through the air like a snake pointing the way. "That is," the host added with a faint smile, "if you still remember by then what you asked." He winked, turned slowly, the hem of his robe whispering against the floor. A faint scent of herbs, and the lightest trace of mint, drifted behind him. The host moved unhurriedly toward the stairs, his steps echoing down the corridor. One by one, the guests began to rise and disperse into the soft half-dark of the hallways. Lily lingered by the window, staring into the empty street outside, where something seemed to move in the shadows, too smooth for the wind, too alive for bushes. Henry, almost at the door, suddenly turned back as if he'd forgotten his umbrella, or a thought. Professor Lucas turned his glass in his hands, still a little embarrassed, then leaned toward his plate. "You felt it too, didn't you?" he whispered to the potato. "Professor, stop talking to dinner," Lily said quietly. "Come here, Henry, you too." She looked around, making sure no one was listening, and added in a half-whisper, "We meet upstairs, when everyone's asleep, on the landing, midnight. We do what we came here for, understood?" Can we not at midnight?" Lucas asked cautiously. "Why?" Henry frowned. "Well, it just sounds like a horror movie setup," Lucas shrugged. Henry smirked. "Lucas, you already have your moon name, Tale of Wisdom. You've got nothing to fear. You're a man of science. How can you even believe in this nonsense?" "All right." Lucas fidgeted. "Then 0005? Works," Lily nodded. 0005, don't forget." Henry yawned, rubbed his eyes. "Well, we've got a couple of hours. I'll grab a nap." "Set your alarms. I'm exhausted too, like I worked 3 shifts straight. We all are. An hour or 2 of sleep should do it." "I think I'll take a shower. How's the water here?" asked Lucas, rising. So-so," Lily replied. "Better go early. Hot water runs out fast." "I might go see the host. He said he'd tell me about the hotel. I'm curious, that's all." "Are you insane?" Lily snapped. "First, we've got work soon, and second," she lowered her voice to a whisper, "they say time flows differently there. You fall asleep and wake up in another era." Henry froze, mouth half open. "Oh, come on," he snorted, though his voice trembled slightly. "Haven't we had enough weirdness for one day?" Lily said quietly, staring right at him. Henry waved a hand as if brushing off a pesky thought and muttered, "Fine, I'll just find a book. Read. So I don't, you know, fall asleep." Lily looked at both of them sternly. "Set your alarms, all of you. We meet upstairs. Don't be late. I won't wait." She was the last to leave. One by one the doors shut, like a curtain closing after a scene. The inn fell silent, but not asleep. Right, they went their separate ways. The darkness outside was so thick it seemed almost liquid, not reflected in the window, but pressing against it from within. Lucas was the first to rush for the bathroom, while there was still hope for hot water. In his room he changed clothes and carefully gathered everything he might need, as though preparing not for a wash but for a landing on a deserted island. Towel, soap, brush, cotton swabs, even a notebook for observations. Clutching the kit to his chest, the professor dashed into the corridor. Henry lingered in the lobby for only a few seconds. In the corner, as if out of thin air, a set of bookshelves appeared, worn volumes with faded titles, leather spines, and a heavy coat of dust. He picked one at random, blew on it, and through the gray cloud a title emerged, as though that mattered. Then, already reading the first page, climbed the stairs, following Lily. Seeing the professor loaded with towels and assorted items, Henry couldn't help himself. "Where are you headed so prepared? Planning a trip to Mars?" Lily, opening the door across the hall, squinted and added dryly, "If you'd brought a spacesuit, the expedition would be complete." Lucas adjusted his glasses, embarrassed, and muttered, "Hygiene is a matter of science." And holding his towel like a banner, Lucas marched triumphantly into the bathroom. Lily entered her room, didn't even undress, kicked her boots into a corner, set her alarm for 0005, and collapsed face first into the pillow like a soldier after a march. On the edge of sleep, a single thought flickered. Just don't oversleep. And that was it. Henry nudged the door open with his foot, eyes still on the book. In his room, he fumbled for his phone, set the alarm, and lay down without even taking off his shoes. He opened the book, cleared his throat, and began to read aloud, quietly but habitually, as if without his voice the words themselves wouldn't agree to go on living. Steam spread through the room like dawn fog, and the bathroom slowly dissolved into a milky haze. The light from the lamp flickered, clinging to the cracks in the air, but the steam swallowed it relentlessly. The professor hurried, showering so fast it seemed as though each second was ticking down the last reserves of hot water, ready to betray him and vanish, leaving him alone with soap foam. A few minutes later, he was already standing by the sink, wrapped in a plaid blanket, having neatly laid out his equipment along the edge with meticulous care. With a toothbrush in his mouth, Lucas squinted at his reflection and mumbled, "God, I look like a thought without caffeine. Dull, pale, and slightly alarming. And again, behaved like a clown at dinner. How do I always manage it? Still ashamed. Talking to a potato. Idiot." He spat, bent to the faucet, rinsed his mouth, lifted his head, and froze. The mirror did not reflect his bathroom. Behind him, instead of tiles and the shelf of shampoo bottles, another room had appeared, as if someone had swapped the scenery while he blinked. Peeling walls, dusty floor, massive furniture draped in a faded sheet. The air beyond the glass looked so dense it seemed to hold the smell of moss and rotting wood. Lucas blinked, gave a crooked smile. "Oh, great. Here we go again. Hallucinations, hello. Well, at least no one's here this time. That's progress." But the air behind the glass quivered as if a fog moved within it. From the shifting veil emerged a tall vase shaped like a coiled serpent. From its open mouth grew a spiral stem, its veins glowing with a faint phosphorescent pattern, and its leaf trembled, as though a live thought pulsed through it. And then she appeared, tall, pale, in an old-fashioned dress, her hair pinned up, standing right behind him, motionless. Lucas didn't turn around. Of course, that's a classic. Every cheap horror starts like this. I'll turn and poof, no one's there. Predictable as hell. First the potato, now you. Why me every time? I'm not even that charming anymore. He turned. She was still there. "Ah!" Lucas screamed, jumped back, hit the shelf, tangled in the blanket, and crashed onto the tiles. "She's real. Damn it, she didn't vanish." The woman raised a jug and scooped water straight from his sink. Lucas flinched. The water sounded real, splashing cold against his skin, biting to the bone. He exhaled hoarsely, swaying forward. Too real for a hallucination. The woman poured the water onto the plant. The soil hissed, as if it drank not water but living fire. Lucas gripped the edge of the sink. The blanket slid from his shoulders. His glasses slipped down his nose. His lips trembled, terror and awe intertwining, and almost as a prayer the words escaped him. "My God! Dioscorea hyperborea!" The word left his mouth like a confession he'd never dared to say aloud. The woman lifted her gaze, Frost bloomed across the mirror, and in it appeared words, heavy as a sentence. REUS EST. The mirror rang with silence. Lucas blinked, his lips trembling. "He is guilty," he whispered, repeating a verdict that wasn't his own. Then froze, stepped back against the wall. "Who? Me? Why me right away?" he hissed, panicking. "I'm a vegetarian. Mostly. God, why did I say that?" The woman turned slowly and dissolved into the doorway. Only her hand remained, white as chalk, beckoning. "Come." No. Lucas shook his head. "This isn't happening. Not me. I haven't even finished my potato. And I'm in a blanket." The hand's gesture grew sharper, more insistent. Fine, I'm coming," the professor exhaled. He wrapped the blanket tighter, stood, adjusted his glasses, and muttered with resignation, "I told you." The paper warned, "Children, don't talk to ghosts." And here I go again, without a hat. He opened the door and stepped into the corridor, barefoot, pale, swaddled in plaid, looking like a man the inn itself was ready to list among its ghosts. Henry jerked upright in bed. Silence. Only the old radiator whispered faintly in the dark. But the scream, he definitely heard it, raspy, from the bathroom. He crept into the corridor. The lights barely worked. The lamp by the stairs blinked with a nervous tick. "Lucas?" he called quietly. "What's with the yelling?" They met in the doorway. Steam still poured off Lucas like he'd just surfaced from a boiling cauldron. He was breathing heavily, clutching his blanket, his eyes bloodshot, his face pale as a sheet. "What the hell? You look like a ghost yourself," Henry muttered. "For a second I thought the afterlife tour had started." I saw her," Lucas rasped. "Her?" Henry frowned. "Who?" "Not who. What?" Lucas burst out, voice shaking. "Dioscorea hyperborea. I saw it with my own eyes. It's alive." Henry blinked, frowned, and muttered, "Hell, and I thought you'd seen a ghost." "There was a woman," Lucas gasped. "She wrote, right on the mirror, in Latin, REUS EST." "What kind of gibberish is that?" Henry crossed his arms. "He is guilty," the professor shot back, "or he stands accused." "It was a verdict, Henry, for me," and she said, "Follow me." Henry squinted, sighed tiredly. "Did the toilet talk to you too, by any chance?" "There's no toilet there to talk to," Lucas snapped, adjusting his glasses with trembling hands. He stepped closer, eyes wide, desperate. "But you saw the plant too, didn't you? In the vase, the spiral stem, the glowing leaves. You must have seen it." Henry exhaled deeply. "No, Lucas. All I heard was you screaming like a lunatic." Lucas froze. His chest heaved, the blanket slipping off his shoulders. In his eyes, fear, awe, and stubborn childlike conviction. He swallowed hard, murmuring softly, "So, only me. Only me." They stood in silence. Henry yawned, rubbed his eyes, sighed. "All right, I'm done. No more horror stories. I've got enough of my own bugs." He waved a hand, heading down the corridor. "Don't forget. We meet. Get some sleep, man." Lucas stayed. He stood there listening, as if the house itself still wanted to say something. Then sighed and muttered to himself, "Well, that's enough horror for one night, hopefully. I'll try to sleep a bit." He disappeared into the shadows of the hallway, and for a moment there was perfect silence, as if the inn itself were listening, checking whether anyone was left awake. Lucas trudged down the corridor, still wrapped in his blanket, muttering under his breath, half self-soothing, half arguing. Hallucinations, of course, side effects, 100%. The Dioscorea, those Latin letters, REUS EST. All stress, that's all. I just need sleep. Tomorrow it'll be gone. In his room, he changed into pajamas, tensed at the sight of the mirror, and covered it with a towel, just in case. Then he made the bed as precisely as a botanist presses leaves into a herbarium, by rule, by line. On the nightstand, he set the alarm, checked it twice, 00, and turning off the light, sank into the pillow with a weary sigh. And in that moment, something in the air clicked. Time itself twisted into a wild tangle. The clocks blinked, went dark, then flared again, each one showing a different hour. On the walls, the hands spun out of control, whirling in a mad vortex, as if some invisible spirit was turning them for fun, mocking. Then, all at once, silence. The alarm rattled like a mechanical mosquito with delusions of grandeur. "I'm not asleep," he muttered hoarsely. "I'm reading a book." The book was, in fact, lying across his face, hugging him like a dream that got stuck midway and refused to leave. He slid it down to his chest, blinked, and looked at the clock. The hands were frozen, exactly at 00. "Oh, come on," he exhaled. "Already." He sat up with a jerk, threw on the first thing within reach, and stepped into the corridor. The inn was asleep, but not quietly. It snored, long and wheezy as if some ancient tractor were idling deep within its bricks. Henry took a step forward and smacked straight into the dark like into a doorframe. He grumbled, "You can't possibly save that much on electricity. You could poke your eye out here. If it's about money, just say so. I'll chip in." "Just turn something on, for God's sake," he muttered, waving his arms as if to swat away the unseen. After a minute, his eyes adjusted. The outlines emerged, a staircase, drooping doors, shadows sprawling across the floor. Henry walked carefully, almost tiptoeing, frowning at the drafts, creaking with every step, as if every sound wanted to expose him as a ghost. He stumbled once, swore under his breath, a threshold, a step, and stopped on the landing where, according to the plan, they were supposed to meet. "Well then," he sighed. "Let's wait for the others. Mission impossible." He leaned against the wall, peering into the dark as if expecting a curtain to rise at any moment and the next midnight scene to begin. 15 minutes passed. No one came. Henry exhaled, leaned over the railing, peering down. "Perfect. No one," he muttered. "Just me, standing guard while this merry gang of conspirators peacefully snores away and misses all the good stuff." He straightened up and snapped his fingers. "Trusk!" The sound sliced through the dark and silence in one clean motion. "What now?" he went on. "Should I wake them all up like my grandpa used to at 5 in the morning for fishing? Let's just hope no one starts whining. 5 more minutes, Mom." Then, a click at the end of the hallway. A light, weak, warm, began to crawl along the wall, stretching toward him like a glowing ribbon, as if inviting. "Or maybe they've already gone without me," he murmured. "And I'm about to miss the main event?" A sound echoed. Henry squinted. Something stirred in the corridor's depths, shadows shifting. He tensed. Footsteps, it seemed, clear, measured, with equal intervals. As though someone was walking closer, unhurried but with the certainty of one who already knows where he's going. The steps echoed in the walls, and it felt as if the inn itself adjusted its breathing to match them. He froze, instinctively hunched like before a strike. Shoulders tightened, breath caught, eyes narrowed, the gaze of a bird of prey just before the dive. And then something emerged from the dark. A mangy cat, as if molded from the shadow itself, leapt onto the railing and stared straight at him. Its eyes gleamed a venomous green, adding one more shiver of eeriness to the corridor. "Damn animal," Henry exhaled. "Nearly scared me to death." And then a melody, faint, distant, as if from a parallel world. It shimmered and slipped away, like mermaids humming a lullaby inside an empty seashell. Maybe I'm the last one," he murmured. "And they're already there?" He sighed, shrugged, and followed the light. It stretched along the corridor like a thin, living thread, leading him into the unknown. At exactly midnight, Lucas's alarm went off. From under the pillow, the bright but slightly cracked march of the Swedish army blared, absurdly loud, like someone had triggered a full-scale military alert across the inn. He sat up, blinked, and muttered, squinting into the dark, "Ah, midnight." His friends had set that march years ago as a prank. "Now you'll never forget us, Professor." And he'd never changed it, whether out of protest, nostalgia, or simple laziness. Maybe it had even grown on him, for no real reason at all. Without turning off the tune, he groped toward the nightstand for his glasses. His fingers found only the bare wood. He searched wider, left, right, even down the floor in case he'd knocked them off in his sleep. Finally, he leaned over and glanced at the table itself. The glasses weren't there. He looked around and froze. They stood neatly on the far nightstand, in a different place, arranged too carefully, almost deliberately. As if someone had placed them there to spite logic, lenses turned toward him as though watching. "Odd," he muttered, scratching his forehead. "I never leave them like that." He crossed the room, shivering a little from the draft, retrieved the glasses, smirked, and slipped them on. Then, humming softly to himself, he headed for the door. Tam Tara Tam. Onward, Professor, into the dark. He slid his feet into fur slippers, wiggled his toes to test the warmth, and, like a true field scientist, dressed with military precision, hooded jacket, headlamp, first aid kit, thermos, notebook, pen. He even tucked a handkerchief into his pocket with the flair of someone going to a ball rather than a midnight mission. Then, a familiar itch in his nose, the kind that heralded catastrophe. "Oh no, not again," he grimaced. He rummaged in his pockets. His fingers found the small plastic bottle. "Ah, there you are, my dear anti-snots," he muttered dryly. He opened the lid, shook out a pill, tossed it in his mouth. No water. He looked around. Nothing. No glass. No bottle. For, crying out loud, he grunted and swallowed it dry, jerking his shoulders as if helping it go down. He picked up the blanket. Awkward. Bulky. "To hell with it," he muttered, and simply threw it over his shoulders like a cloak, transforming into a sort of shamanic burrito. "There are stranger things," he observed philosophically, glancing at the mirror. The mirror nodded back. Only then did he realize he hadn't. Lucas froze, neck stiffening. He leaned closer. But now the reflection was still, perfectly ordinary. He reached for the switch. Click. The light died. He opened the door and stepped into a corridor woven from thick shadow webs. He flicked on the headlamp. A beam shot forward, sharp, narrow, almost heroic. "Oh, thank God it works," he breathed out. But after 5 steps, the light flickered, whimpered, and went out. "What the—" Lucas froze. "No, come on. I just changed the batteries." He tapped the casing, shook it, knocked the sides. The lamp stayed dead, as if the night itself had stolen its power. "Brilliant," he muttered. "Welcome to the kingdom of darkness." He stood there, breathed in. The dark didn't retreat. If anything, it crept closer. "Fine," he sighed. "I'll go anyway." Step, another. "Perfect. And where's the damn light switch?" he muttered aloud. "God, who the hell turned off reality?" He stretched his hands forward, moving like a blind archaeologist in a cursed temple. "Might as well light a torch," he grumbled. The darkness around him felt tight, almost breathing. He kept humming the march under his breath, a feeble charm against ghosts. "Tam Tara Tam, step into the dark. Professor ready for contact, and if not, I'll fight him off with slippers." He took a step, another, and slammed into a wall. Ouch! He groped around, found a handle, pulled a closet. "Of course," he snorted. "Corridor of spirits. And me in a blanket, naturally." He turned and saw something flicker in the mirror. The reflection lagged. Lucas stepped right. The reflection stayed. Another step. Still off. "Wait. Stop," he whispered. "I'm not insane. I'm not. I'm a cognitive flora researcher. I have a degree." The mirror trembled, just slightly, as if it wasn't sure either. He spun away, hunched, walked faster, still whistling the march, quieter now, warier. Then stopped, took a step back, slowly turned. The meeting spot lay ahead, empty, time to spare. "Uh-huh," he murmured. "All right, you want to play?" He took a breath and ran forward, leaping suddenly like a kid checking if a jack-in-the-box will spring. Nothing. "Of course," he smirked. "Just like in those dumb horror flicks. Starts funny, ends with a bam." He spread his arms, spun like a windmill, laughing. Even jumped once, slapping his thighs. "Well, apparently I'm already a ghost. No ID, no paperwork." He jumped again. The mirror didn't reflect. A second of silence. Then, in a blink, he was standing at a lectern. A bright light hit his face. Before him stretched a hall, dark, filled with hundreds of eyes. At first, murmurs, then laughter. He turned. Behind him, the blackboard covered in his handwriting, a botanical sketch, a strange Hyperborean-looking plant with a root and fine spidery tendrils. The handwriting was his, the shaking hand, too. Someone in the hall burst out laughing. "Another fairy-teller? Raving, Professor." Lucas froze. He knew this moment too well. That lecture, that failure, his humiliation. He blinked, and the mirror blinked with him. Suddenly he was back, just his own reflection again. Pale, nervous, but him. He fumbled inside his jacket, found the leather notebook, and pulled it out. A slip of parchment peeked from between the pages. He unfolded it carefully, almost reverently. He could barely see the symbols, but his fingers recognized the rough texture instantly. "It's here," he breathed. "Thank God, at least something's still mine." He pressed the notebook to his chest. "It's fine. I'll go back. I'll show them all. I'll bring that plant, as an ordinary bouquet, put it in a vase before their eyes, and that day will be the start of a new science." A pause. "Let's see them laugh, then." He was back in the corridor, alone, frozen in the dark. The march played its final bars. He was about to hum the tune again, for courage, when he stopped. At the far end of the hallway, something stood. Lucas inhaled sharply, squinting. A silhouette, dark, motionless, as if cut out of the air itself. "What the?" he whispered. The shape seemed feminine, tall, graceful, yet faintly shifting, like fabric in wind. "What wind?" he muttered aloud. "There's no draft here." He frowned. No breeze. The corridor stood still, and yet the shadow moved, just barely. He tensed, took a step closer. The weak glow of the lamp by the staircase shimmered through it, as through mist. Maybe a reflection, an illusion. Another step. The figure stayed still, didn't flinch, didn't turn. When he came within a few paces, it turned suddenly, and Lucas saw her eyes. They flashed, strange, catching a light that wasn't there, like two flames hiding darkness inside. The hair, styled like the ladies in oil portraits. The dress, heavy, dark, as if sewn from century-old curtains or a soldier's coat. Lucas exhaled, half under his breath, uncertain whether from fear or absurd awe. "Ah, of course, a real countess," he muttered, as if giving her a nickname. He scratched his temple, struggling to recall etiquette. How did one address them again? Your Excellence, Your Grace." He blurted out the first thing that came to mind and winced. "God, nonsense. Fine. You're everything." He lowered his voice. "Have you, by any chance, seen my friends?" He sounded like a lost tourist at a train station from the wrong century. No answer. She turned, slowly, soundlessly, as if moving underwater. A thought struck him. Maybe she's already taken them. Not literally, but absorbed them, pulled them in. There. He didn't finish the thought. The shape drifted down the staircase, silent, smooth, like a falling cloud. Lucas stayed, watching, unable to look away, as if his eyes had betrayed him and now belonged to hers. He waved a hand weakly, then stepped forward into the corridor's depth. He stopped, listened. "Follow me?" The words still echoed inside him, soft but insistent like a call from dreams. He approached the railing, looked down. Below, another mirror, and in it, her, standing still. Then she raised her hand and beckoned. But now, it wasn't just her. Behind the woman, deep in the reflection, Lucas saw Lily. She was lying in a sarcophagus, motionless, her face pale as porcelain, eyes closed. She wore ritual garments, fabric covered in symbols, a wreath of dried flowers, and around her neck an amulet he recognized instantly, the same one from that old newspaper clipping about the serial killer. From her mouth protruded a crumpled scrap of paper, exactly like the ones in those gruesome reports. Lucas froze. The air thinned. He tried to inhale, couldn't. His chest tightened like in a nightmare. He wanted to scream, but didn't. "Well, you've got my attention, no doubt," he muttered to himself. "You want to show me something, or tell me something, right? Fine, I'm coming. I won't leave Lily. Not like this, with that paper in her mouth." He shook his head, adding under his breath, fragmented, "And no, I'm not telling anyone. This time, I'll figure it out myself. Otherwise, they'll just say I've lost it again," flashed through his mind. He swallowed hard and began to descend the staircase, not out of curiosity, out of fear. 00:05. The phone burst into song, an old hit by some famous singer, the same one that had played at Lily's wedding. She'd set it as her alarm that day and never changed it. The phone sang while she lay sprawled across the bed just as she'd fallen 2 hours earlier, face buried in the pillow, one leg dangling, still fully dressed. Without opening her eyes, she groped for the phone and hit stop, mumbled into the pillow, "I've got a second alarm. When that one rings, I'll get up." Seconds passed, then minutes, then 30. Lily jerked upright as if jolted by a live wire. Her hair stood on end, eyes squinting. "Damn! The second one's weekdays only." She smacked her forehead. "Brilliant, Lily. Just applause." The clock read 00:30. "I'm the one who said, 'Don't be late,'" she grumbled. "Perfect. Genius level." She started yanking on her jeans while hopping across the room, kicked one boot, then the other, tripped, cursed, and finally flung the door open, stepping straight into darkness. The door slammed behind her, 2 confident steps, and bang, she crashed into something metallic. "Ow! Damn it!" she hissed, grabbing her leg. "What the—" By the sound, a bucket, a plain tin, disgustingly loud bucket. "Brilliant," muttered Lily, kicking it aside. "Now the buckets are attacking me, too." Scanning the faint light, she dashed forward, blindly as if chasing her own shadow. A minute later, she stood by the staircase, empty. She muttered, looking around. "So, am I late or not? Did they start without me?" A pause. Or they overslept, or... She waved the thought away. Whatever. She turned, exhaled, her breath steadying. Panic gone, only irritation left. Then she remembered the flashlight, a tiny, battered one in the back pocket of her jeans. "Idiot," she muttered, pulling it out and clicking it on. The beam flickered, trembling, as if it too was afraid of the dark. "Well, that's something." She sighed and began to search. She knocked on Lucas's door. Silence. Henry's. Also nothing. "Great," she snorted. "You want an egg? Don't wait for the rooster. She took a breath, smoothed her hair, and said firmly, in her own grounded way, to hell with the plan. I'll do it myself. She stepped into the dark corridor. For a moment, Lily froze. Okay, I have the symbol. I remember it. Clearly. It should be here. The image rose before her eyes. Her husband's hand, the tattoo, the mark. Every shaman had their plant symbol, a living seal. But this one wasn't his. Think, Lily, think. The flashlight trembled and seemed to illuminate not the corridor, but her thought. The hotel's called 29.5 Shamans, she murmured. 29 rooms. Okay, let's check. She shone the beam on the nearest door, the one opposite Lucas's room. On the wood, a crest, a sigil, but not the right one. Aha, figures. She moved on. She hurried down the hall, sweeping the light across each door, muttering curses under her breath, checking them one after another, like a detective with a headache and a deadline. No, not that one. Still not. A sigh. Oh, for God's sake. Where did you go? Did I seriously miss you? She stopped, catching her breath. Okay. She exhaled in frustration. Why even 29.5? Where's this half? A 30th room or a half of one? She snorted. God, that sounds stupid. Half a shaman. Then, answering herself softly, almost laughing, Lily, think, not a room, half a room. Something that exists, but doesn't count. She froze. A sly, determined smile crept onto her face. Of course, she breathed. The storage room. We used to play there as kids, under the stairs, our little shaman tent. She chuckled, shaking her head. My God, it's so simple. You made me run around the whole floor. Couldn't just tell me right away, could you? She sighed, smiling faintly. Fine, you're forgiven. You're in a coma after all. She turned toward the stairwell, calm now, almost serene, as if everything had finally clicked into place. That's it, the half room, she said quietly, like putting a period at the end of a sentence. In her mind, James's voice surfaced, sly and teasing. The last one was the apprentice. Nobody counted him. He was like half the moon, 0.5. Lily turned, beneath the stairs, their old shaman tent. She stepped closer. The flashlight beam glided over a peeling door, a carved mark upon it. That's the one, she whispered, laughing softly. Eureka! She pushed the door. Dust, dry herbs, and wax scented the air. The beam swept over shelves, drums, wreaths, a faceless doll, and a blackened mirror. Lily had just stepped inside when a voice echoed from below, Lucas's voice. He stood in the lobby, wrapped in a blanket, talking to the mirror, gesturing like a man arguing with himself. Oh, great, a mirror monologue, Lily muttered. Well, for him that's practically normal. She shook her head, a touch weary. Fine, let him have his fun. I won't interrupt. And with that, Lily stepped fully into the closet. Inside, a narrow room waited. On the floor, a chalk circle. Against the wall, a dark mirror. On a pedestal, a scroll. She unrolled it. The handwriting was sharp, deliberate. Put on the ritual garment, sit inside the circle, light the candles of the 4 elements, mix the 3 components, speak without pause. Hear me, spirits of the forest, take me into your pack. Close your eyes, drink, strike the bowl upon the floor, do not fear, wait. Lily snorted, lifting her eyebrows. Okay. Yeah, something's definitely off with this ritual. She chuckled, speaking to him in absent humor. Darling, you always had to be the lead shaman, some complex of yours. And me, I'm fine, no need for all this drama. Couldn't it just once be simple? She picked up the fabric, turned it over critically, like a market shopper inspecting a suspicious deal. It was thick and heavy. A curtain from Grandma's dacha, she muttered, pulling it on. She glanced at the mirror. Vengeance of the goddess for a failed ritual. Perfect. She grimaced, adjusting the folds. God, I look like a hungover witch ghost. Who's summoning whom here? Lily knelt inside the circle, her knees cracked. Thanks, joints, for the reminder I'm not 20, she muttered. She lit the candles. The first one went out immediately. Okay, fire, don't be stupid, she said, shielding it with her hand. Before her stood a bowl and a box of ingredients, 3 crookedly labeled vials. Sounds of the forest, swamp moss, rabbit's heart. Lovely, like a cocktail special. The margarita of doom. Just missing a slice of lemon, she smirked. All right, let's go. She poured everything in, stirred thoroughly, then froze. The mirror stayed black and still, no gleam, no hint of life. Round 2, she muttered, dumping the rest. Smoke hissed. The air filled with the stench of bog water and damp rags. Ugh, disgusting. She grimaced. James, you seriously wanted me to meet the spirits drinking this? With deep suspicion, she scooped a sip and drank. The taste wasn't just bad, it was vile, like burnt onions fermenting in old soup. Lily choked, coughed, eyes watering. God, I'm gonna die, she gasped, then wiped her mouth and muttered anyway. Hear me, spirits of the forest, take me into your pack. She waited. Well, where's the effect? She looked around. Hello? I drank the sludge, said the line. Oh! She smacked her forehead. Eyes closed. She squeezed her lids shut, waited. Silence. Peeking with one eye. Nothing. The mirror remained mute. She wiped her nose, smirked. Honestly, what am I even doing? Wrapped in a curtain, squatting, mumbling. And answered herself. Getting old, maybe. Fine. Time for the dramatic finale. She stood. You want to strike? Fine. She grabbed the bowl and slammed it to the floor. The board beneath it jumped and crashed into the mirror. The glass cracked, then shattered into glittering dust. Behind it, no wall, only emptiness, warm, trembling emptiness, like black water. From within came a whisper. Her name. Lily stood there, breath uneven, staring into the void. A draft brushed her face, cold yet familiar, carrying the scent of hospital corridors, old dust, and forgotten memories. So that's magic, huh? No, don't be afraid, no manual, just boom, and a portal. She adjusted the heavy cloth, smiled faintly. Great. Woke everyone up. She clenched her fists, steeling herself. The darkness ahead quivered, warm, resonant, like the stretched film of a dream. She felt it tug at her, not her body, but deeper, just below the heart. All right, Lily, there's no other way. And she stepped in. From the end of the corridor came a soft, warm light. Somewhere deeper, music played, muffled like from an old radio tuned between worlds. Henry narrowed his eyes. In the doorway of the last room, a shadow moved. Someone was inside. Aha, the host. Guess he really was waiting, he murmured. I did say I'd drop by after dinner. He stepped closer, knocked on the wood, and as he pushed the door open, added dryly, Anyone here? I'm coming in. As agreed. Just, if you've got bones and drums again, best warn me first. The door gave way easily, and Henry crossed the invisible threshold. The air inside felt different, thick, damp, with a bitter trace of herbs and age. It smelled of pollen, cinnamon, and something else vaguely familiar, as if an ancient cabinet had fallen ill and was now breathing heavy. Everything was muted, wrapped, as though he'd walked not into a room but into a shaman's yurt where time stopped ticking. On a rickety ladder stood the host. In one hand, a rag, in the other, a book. He wiped the cover gently, not just cleaning it but reviving thoughts stuck between the pages. Each motion looked more like a ritual than housekeeping, slow, reverent, as though he were rocking the memory itself to sleep. Under his breath, he mumbled, half lullaby, half incantation, sleep, sleep word. Tomorrow you'll wake again. Not tonight. Hush now, hush. Behind him loomed a precarious tower of other tomes, leaning toward collapse. On his chest hung the squat Bruick, steaming faintly, bubbling like a nervous heart. Without turning, the host grumbled, "Ah, it's you. Neckem, help me by all the drumming devils. These books are staging a coup." Henry silently caught the wobbling pile before it fell and carried the top few volumes to the table. One slipped from his hands and landed open. The tattered cover read, "How to Leave the Circle." Automatically, Henry flipped it open. "Oh, no, no, don't touch that," cried the host, leaping down the ladder. He snatched the book back, pressing Bruick protectively to his chest. "You are not the one to hold this. Neckem mustn't touch shamanic things. Neckem." He hugged the book close, muttering more gravely, "And be careful with the top shelf. There's reverse memory up there. Open one of those, and you'll forget everything you knew before." Henry raised a brow. "Of course, and if I drop two, I go back to the womb?" The host shook his head seriously, almost wearily. "No, then Bruick decides. Don't test him." He exhaled, speaking more to the air than to Henry. "You think books, shamans? These are toys? No, not a film, not a game. To become a shaman, one must give something up, a sacrifice, or two." "A sacrifice? Like actual sacrifice?" Henry asked, testing if this was another riddle. The host said nothing, only turned his head slightly. Even through the cloth over his eyes, the gaze was piercing. Henry stepped back, hands up. "I just helped," he said evenly. He looked around the room, the shelves, the dust, the uneven walls, touched a nearby spine with his fingertip and smirked faintly. "Honestly, though, all this smoke, tea, chanting sounds like nonsense to me." The host turned sharply, so precisely Henry swore he saw through the blindfold. Bruick hissed on his chest, puffing a small cloud of steam. Henry flinched. For a moment he feared the kettle would boil over and explode. "But really," he added quickly, half defensive, "how can potions, alchemy, or all this folklore compete with modern medicine and tech?" He forced a grin. "Maybe show me a trick, so I can at least pretend to understand." The host didn't turn again. His voice came quiet, distant. "The time will come when you will show me tricks, Neckem." He smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "In your world, medicine is a bottle from a pharmacy, with a number, a seal, a barcode. In another, it's the bark of a tree, the bitterness that keeps the heart beating, or a root that speaks to the bone." A pause, then deeper. "Where you live, you think a pill heals. Where I live, it's the spirit's call. There, a needle in a white coat. Here, an old woman with smoke and humming." He went quiet, as if weighing the words in his palms. Then, with a hint of irony, "Tell me, if we have so many scholars, does that make them all frauds?" "No, they simply serve another task." He nodded to himself, murmuring almost tenderly, "So who's truly mad? The one who swallows a capsule without knowing what's inside, or the one who brews a potion from the living bouquet of earth and hears nature itself pour it into his cup?" Bruick let out a proud puff of steam, sealing the phrase like a punctuation mark. "Medicine isn't prescribed by a diploma," said the host. "It's granted by faith. And the healer is not the one who studied books, but the one in whom others see a power beyond the visible. These teachings come from the ancients, those who spoke without speaking. To an outsider, they'll always look like madness, no matter how long he studies." Henry raised an eyebrow, silent, then sat on the edge of the table, glancing at the crooked wall, then back to the host. "Tell me something. Why's the inn called 29.5 Shamans? Why not 30, or at least 29? What's with the strange number?" The host stood still. It seemed he was listening not to Henry, but to the air itself. Then slowly, unhurriedly, he lifted his hand and pointed to the ceiling, Why 29.5? He repeated softly. Because the moon is never whole. It's always either fading or sneaking back. His fingers groped along the stack of books, moving carefully, blindly but surely, as if they remembered the way. He found one, thick, rough leather binding, and brushed off the dust with a single motion. Ooh, once there were 30, he said, half proud, half sorrowful. Long ago. The years erased all trace of him, as if he'd never existed. On the cover, embossed in dark letters, the legend of the 30th. The host ran his fingers across the title as if checking that the letters were still real. He stood before Henry, holding the book like a sacred relic or a memory too painful to give away. Here the story was sealed, he said quietly, voice soft, almost lullaby-like. But here, it begins again, right now. He held the book out to Henry. Henry nodded, tilting his head slightly. May I hold it? Brurick gave a sharp psh. A single puff of steam, that was enough. Henry understood. Still, he carefully accepted the tome. The pages were thick, grainy, as if they'd absorbed the dust of ages. Inside, meticulous records, each page for one shaman, Arun, shaman of ash. He could bury cities so their screams would never rise again. Mira, shamaness of mirrors. She saw not what was, but what should have been, and so on, brief ritualistic tales, laconic like carvings on ancient cave walls. Henry turned the final page. The 30th, blank, no name, no symbol, only a thin film of dust, as if words once written had vanished. What does it mean? He whispered. The host shrugged slightly, his voice calm, level, like the closing of a circle. It means fate hasn't decided yet, or it's waiting for someone to decide for it.